What if charisma isn't something you're born with, but a powerful skill you can actually learn? Welcome back to the Mike Method Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Desjardins, and today we're diving into a topic that's reshaping the way we think about leadership, charisma. My guest today, Milam Miller, is known as the real-life Ted Lasso, with a career rooted deeply in European football, where he inspired teams to generate tens of millions annually. Milam's approach isn't about flashy charm or superficial appeal. It's about genuine human connection built through confidence, warmth, and intentional kindness. Milam has transformed these insights into his forthcoming book, The Charisma Craft, a modern leadership guide to enhancing your Riz factor, set for release in June 2025. Through his company, Be Confident and Kind, Milam helps leaders at companies like Amazon, Google, and Uber unlock their true potential, reduce conflict, and drive performance through what he calls healthy charisma. Today, we'll unpack why charisma has gotten such a bad rap, how both introverts and extroverts can harness its power, and practical steps you can take right now to boost your own leadership charisma. So whether you're looking to enhance your influence, deepen your connections, or simply become a leader people genuinely want to follow, this is a conversation for you. Let's dive in. Milam, I really appreciate you making time to be on the podcast today.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here, Mike.
So let's talk about the Riz. Let's talk about the Riz. My daughter uses that phrase or that word. I want to talk about it in leadership context. What do we need to know?
Sure. Well, before I dive in, I'm just curious if you feel comfortable sharing, how old is your daughter?
She's turning 13.
Turning 13. Okay, so a 13-year-old is using the word Riz. It's hot right now. For those who don't know, Riz was the word of the year in 2023, Oxford English Languages, and it means to Riz up, style, charm, attractiveness. It can be used both as a noun and verb, but Riz up somebody that's in your orbit. And I found that fascinating, Mike, because I'm like, Riz is actually what a lot of leaders have, but the best ones that embody Riz know that it's not about them, it's about others. Right. So just to bottom line it, I think Riz is kind of this magnetic pull or aura, but not because you think, you're hotter than everyone else, or you're, to be a bit vulgar, your shit don't stink, but to actually say, because I care about others.
Right. And it's the root, like Genesis is charisma, right? Like the sort of larger thing we're talking about is overall charisma and leaders. And I think, we say that out loud, charisma, it's like, oh yeah, that's for those extroverted, outgoing, big personality leaders. They've got really, solid charisma. And maybe somebody who's listening to this, who's more of an introverted leader, who is more contemplative and takes more time. It's like, well, I don't really experience myself that way. So I don't really feel like I have charisma.
Great points. So what I would say to that is it's a yes and. Yes, we think of charisma traditionally as larger than life, bravado, gregarious, and perhaps that can be true. But I think the people that are most charismatic, no, again, it's not about them. They're really adept at drawing others in, making others feel seen, heard, and remembered. So I guess to parlay that to introverts who have the Riz often have that, what we would call quiet confidence. They're very self-assured, but they're not because they know they have all the answers, but because they carry themselves with such groundedness, maybe class or dignified demeanor, that they're willing to ask for help or ask for opinions, and taking in that feedback. People feel like that their opinion matters. So that quiet confidence that they exhibit, that they bring others along for it, that's a form of Riz too.
So quiet confidence that actually draws people in, that allows you to have the ability to influence others inside and outside your organization. That's also a great definition of charisma.
Precisely. And just to go back to what you said, Riz, yes, it's like the middle of the word charisma. For anyone who maybe didn't catch it, I get it. It's you're kind of like, what, Riz? But it's a fun word because there's very few in the English dictionary that are like that. We have like flu that comes from influenza. We have fridge that comes from refrigerator, right? So it's it just rolls off the tongue. I see why it won word of the year. It beat out Swiftie and other words that your 13-year-old daughter might like too. Admittedly, I'm a Swiftie, so
okay.
I was fascinated whenever I dove into the research on Riz and just really thought back to my own use case applications of my experiences in the working world and how we're seeing Riz manifest in the future.
Yeah. So tell me about that. So let's talk about what brought you into this space of focusing on charisma and then leading you to the place of wanting to write a book, your forthcoming book about it as well.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that, Mike. Writing a book is a labor of love. I'll tell you that. It's both grueling and rewarding. And I'm glad that I wrote it on this topic, because this topic is something that I'd be curious if you hold this perspective. At a very young age, I remember being told I was charismatic. And I think that was not because I do identify as an extrovert. At times I can be larger than life, and other times I can be more subdued. But I think it was because of perhaps I was precocious and just self-assured. And I've always been fascinated by people and their stories. And I've never met a stranger. I'm from Texas, so I like to be friendly, just like Canadians. Like we're friendly people. And I thought it was a compliment. But as I grew older, I realized that a lot of people think charisma is a bad thing, and it's gotten a really bad rap. That I've been duped, I've been manipulated. We look at politicians all the time. I feel like Adolf Hitler is a case study of bad charisma. And then I don't even want to get into the politics of if Obama's charismatic or Trump's charismatic. Like, we're not even going to open that can of worms. You get what I'm saying? It's very polarizing. And so I really had to go back in order to go forward of how can we use this word that's now in our cultural zeitgeist for good? And so much of my book is about healthy charisma, and it's about helping others feel seen, helping others feel heard, and helping others feel remembered. And from my experiences, I find that the most charismatic individuals do that.
What's interesting is you say about the word becoming polarized, having both good and bad connotations. It reminds me of the word feedback, right? Like people come to work at my company and they're like, okay, this is weird because like you guys say feedback all the time, but like most of the time it's really nice. And there's a lot of that feedback shared. And then sometimes it's like, it's helpful developmental type feedback. It just lands differently than it lands anywhere else. And so it's, we've been on this mission for the past 25 years in the work we do to ensure that words like feedback don't carry a negative connotation to them. They carry curiosity. Like, okay, I have feedback for you. Cool. I don't know what it's going to be. Hopefully it's helpful. And if the intent is great, then usually it is helpful. I think charisma kind of strikes me the same way, that if the intent is positive, I guess the question is like, does Darth Vader have great charisma? He seems to lead a lot of people. And I get that that's just a movie. So does the flip side of that, the good side of the force, right? Is that good charisma on that side? I just feel like the way you talk about it and the way you express it in being confident, in being able to draw in others, in being able to influence others versus manipulate others, like those are, I think, all positive leadership traits. I think any leader would want to have those traits.
That's right. Well, there's so many things rattling around in my head right now where we're really diving into something good here. I like how on the word feedback, you take away any sort of good feedback, bad feedback. We're really stripping that away. Feedback is intended to help you. It's intended to serve you. When I started diving into the research on charisma, there was all these terms, inverse charisma, and it's about the other person. That's where I've kind of anchored on healthy charisma, because it doesn't need to be inverse charisma. Charisma is just connection. We've been taught that it's one way attraction. Me, I'm in the spotlight. The examples, again, that I was always told as a young boy was John F. Kennedy. He's a good orator, or anyone that maybe is suave. And for women, it looks differently. The research is truly fascinating there. But you said something that I thought was really important. I'm not miss, which was charisma isn't just confidence, but it's also kindness. And that kindness has to be extended to ourselves first and foremost in order for us to give it to others. Because if I bring this full circle, if we're giving feedback, but we have a really mean inner critic or a saboteur voice that's like, oh, you like messed that up in that client meeting, or you should have said this, or that email should have been perfect, you didn't dot every I and cross every T, then that's how you're going to give feedback. It's going to be harsh feedback. It's going to be critical feedback. So constructive criticism is maybe a way that we like frame it, but really is it in the spirit of kindness, and is it in the spirit of somebody else's highest good to develop and grow into the best version of themselves?
And there are so many models that are out there that speak to the intent, right? Like any model can be used for bad purposes if the intent is bad. So, and that a lot of the times has to do with whether or not the leader, to look at the concept of above the line, below the line, right? If they're above the line, then they're thinking in a creative, generative, helpful, kind place. And if they're below the line, then they're usually steeped in frustration. They lack curiosity. They look to blame. They look to try to find whose fault it is, right? And so then, if you're above the line and that's your intent, then whatever tool it is you're using, the outcome of that is most likely to be good.
Yeah. I'm glad you're bringing up above the line and below the line, because maybe for listeners who aren't familiar with it, you and I like live and breathe this all the time. I've found that application has been so powerful in a lot of my interpersonal relationships. And that's what my book is intended to do. It's a
Okay.
modern leadership guide, but it is think of it as your toolkit for interpersonal relations and how to deal with
Right.
other people. And if you've ever heard the term pity party, or a friend call and
Yeah.
say, I just need to vent, that's below the line. And
Yeah.
it's okay if we know that going into it, or we give permission. We're like, I'm here for you. Like, let
Right.
it out, be below the line. But I think leaders especially have to be very cognizant of that and protect their energy, because if they have those energy vampires or that's zapping their energy, it's not on the leader to bring you above the line. We are all responsible for the energy we bring into spaces. Now, it might be up to the leader to point out that blind spot. Like,
For
hey, I
sure.
say this in the spirit of care. And again, you've said it so many times so far this conversation. I love it. I say this in the spirit of curiosity. You seem below the line. What's really going on?
Right.
And really, when we operate from that place of compassion, we can get clear on what's going on to help everyone rise together. And I really think charisma is that catalyst for connection, and it has that power to transform relationships for good.
So for listeners who are curious about this whole concept that Milam and I are talking about, above the line, below the line, Katie will drop it in the show notes, but there's a great video on YouTube. If you just type in above the line, below the line right now, you'll see it come up. It's super simple concept. Has been around for I think 15 years. It's really, really powerful. And it can help you as a leader, help to navigate where you're at, where your nervous system is taking you. And it can help you to understand if your team is derailed, then possibly they're below the line. And then, yeah, as you say, it's not the responsibility as a leader to go drag somebody above the line, but it is a responsibility to maybe point out, hey, I think you might be below the line. What might this situation look like if you were above the line?
That's right.
So Katie will drop that in the show notes. I'm super curious. I want to know, if I'm a leader who is like, okay, well, I feel like I know leaders who have charisma. I'm not sure that people would talk about me that way. So, and I've always wondered, or always maybe thought that charisma is just a thing people are born with. They're just naturally that way. Like Ryan Reynolds, right? If you think about actors, I would think about him as somebody that has magnetic charisma, just great energy and influences, draws people in. And, not everybody's Ryan Reynolds. So
That's right.
My curiosity is, if people want to go down this road, where do you start? How do you get the risk?
Yeah, love this for so many reasons, because Ryan Reynolds does have what I feel like the young kids would call swag, but he's got the riz too, you know? And I think a lot of that is just because he's so damn funny, Ryan Reynolds, and he knows how to connect. It's just he's found his authentic voice is what it is. And we see that come through in ad campaigns. It's playful, and we like that levity in the times we're living in. So great example there. I love that, Mike. Where do we start? We start with a mindset shift. That's number one.
Okay.
And let's shift our mindset around. It's not a personality trait. In fact, it's a skill, and skills can be developed. Skills can be cultivated. In my book, I call it the charisma craft, because we're crafting this skill in order for it to feel aligned with who we are. Again, you don't have to be an extrovert. You don't have to be an introvert. You just need to be you. And so I always say that if we can embrace a new definition, a mindset of charisma as a learnable skill, then we can start taking steps to figure out what works for us in the spirit of connection.
I love that, because it kind of goes to those old Maybelline commercials, right? Maybe she's
born with it.
Born with it, right? Yeah, maybe she's born with it, and oh, maybe it's Maybelline, right? It's was this person born with charisma, or did they learn the specific mindset and the specific competencies which help them to develop that? Which reminds me of emotional intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence is one of those skills that it's mindsets, habits, and behaviors that we can choose to grow, choose to learn, competencies we can choose to learn as well. So let's talk more about that. So somebody decides, hey, I want to, is there an assessment? Can I figure out where my charisma is at right now? Do I have to self-assess, or where's the starting point for someone once they know that it's competency based and they have the willingness to put the effort in? Where do you go next?
Sure. So there's a lot of thought leadership out there, but I'm going to take us to an academic place.
Sure.
There's leading research out of Princeton, and it's from the Fisk Lab, a famous professor named Susan T. Fisk. She's collaborated with Amy Cuddy, who people I'm sure are familiar with her TED Talk, as well as others. It boils down to two things. How competent are you? And how warm are you in your interactions?
Okay.
I use this lens because in my business, which is called Be Confident and Kind, some people would challenge, is confidence actually competence? I would say yes, it is. Because if you have true competency in something, then that comes from reps, that comes from actions. You're
Right.
building the competency by doing, and that builds your confidence. On the flip side, warmth is really just another word for, are you approachable? Are you kind? Are you seen as a risk? And so there's so many things we can do, even in a digital environment like this, Mike, with me chatting with you from Dallas, Texas. I'm showing my hands. I'm showing I'm not hiding anything behind my back. I'm open and receptive and warm, and I care about this conversation. So I'm fascinated by body language cues. There's a thought leader out there, Vanessa Van Edwards. She has a wonderful website called The Science of People. She's done a lot of work around this. And there's other authors, Olivia Fox-Cabane, who boils it down to presence, power, and again, warmth. But for me, my formula and the clients I work with, we really get clear on what brings them confidence and what exhibits kindness to others. So those are the two things that I look at with the clients I work with to build their skill of charisma.
I love that because that's so simple, right? Like that's something. So I can remember those two things when I think about charisma and, confidence and kindness, like beautiful words. So
and let's take Ryan Reynolds, for example. I just want to jump back to that because Ryan may derive confidence from being funny. I don't know if that dates back to his childhood and he was the class clown, right? He's insanely creative, right? I know that Deadpool was, for example, that script was rejected many times over before it finally got produced and put out into the world. And what a gift to the world it has become. But I think about okay, if I'm Ryan, what brings me confidence and how do I build up that proficiency? And then of course, what showcases my kindness, my humanity, and how do I connect with people and showcase that there's a real person behind this? This isn't just a facade. And that's probably very hard with public figures. I don't know Ryan personally. If he ever listens to this podcast, I'd love for him to chime in on what being confident and kind looks like to him. But there's no question he's worked at the skill of charisma to become likable, relatable, you name it.
Well, so I know not everybody listening to this on the podcast might know this about you, but you might be able to pull that off through European Football League connections to somehow make it over to him. And so he listens to this. Yeah, I guess, so then let's talk about the second part of that, which is kindness. So if confidence is doing the reps, so that is building up the competence, and kindness is the warmth that other people are feeling from being in relationship with you. Like, how do we directly develop both those skills? Like, I won't even just stick on kindness. Let's talk about how we directly do competence and how do we to build confidence, and then how do we directly do warmth and other skills to build kindness? What are the practical things I can do day to day that would help me to develop those skills?
Sure. So I want to bottom line it for listeners. If we're going to call building up your confidence or competency as a doing, then let's be clear that your warmth or your kindness is your being and how you're showing up in those interactions. I really think that balancing the doing and being energy can be really powerful and like a profound visual for listeners. A tactical way to build up your confidence. I feel like this word is overused. You challenge me if you feel differently, but executive presence. We love talking about executive presence in the workplace.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. You don't need to be an executive to have presence, but to build your presence, you've got to go and get reps in. You've got to go and be present. You've got to bring your best self. So if that's not within your comfort zone, I would encourage a listener to find a community that you can get plugged in, go to a networking event, conferences, whatever it may be, and start to notice your interactions. Start to notice how you're showing up. And one of my favorite techniques to help my clients develop active listening, this can also be in a virtual room, but again, I think it's better to get uncomfortable in a live setting, is to engage what I call your ENT. And what I mean by that, Mike, is whenever we're talking, sometimes we forget what our body's doing. And this is just one of three methods in a body scan I do. I have a head, upper body, lower body. And for your head, your ENT is engaging in eye contact between the ears. So my fun fact is I can't stare at both of your pupils at the same time, but I can look at your third eye center. It's the yogi in me. You don't want to look you don't want it to appear as if though you're looking at somebody's mouth, they have food in their teeth, all of that. Stare at the third eye center, engage in eye contact between the eyes. The second is nod moderately from the nose. I notice whenever I watch myself play back on videos that I kind of vigorously will either turn my nose up unbeknownst to me, and I don't want to be perceived as elitist or superior, but it's just a weird neck thing I have, or I'll be really an eager beaver and be totally, Mike, totally. we need to like pump the brakes, because then I come off as a people pleaser. And so I've had to literally develop this skill of, okay, as I'm engaging in eye contact between Mike's eyes, I'm also nodding moderately from my nose. And this shows that I'm engaged and I'm listening, but I'm not wanting to jump into the conversation. Again, eager beaver of like, let me share my perspective. And then finally, the T is trade smiles and sounds from the throat. It's a very simple way to be like, And as long as you're smiling, it's like, and if something sounds weird, maybe you don't want to smile. But again, it's a practice of really mindfulness, of understanding what you're doing in your social interactions. Any thoughts or questions on that?
I think all that's bang on. I mean, it's the same cues that when you're first learning how to public speak, right? Those are the same things. So making sure you're actually, I guess in video, using your hands requires, actually for me, this is really high to hold my hands up, to bring my hands into view. But on stage, that moderating our actions, being aware if we are speaking to somebody directly that we are looking them in the eyes. And this isn't the like death stare of like, okay, it's getting creepy. Yeah, exactly. Like you, but really just, you can look away every now and then, but really like being present means that person feels like they're the only person in the room. This matters a lot at networking events because it's so easy to be looking over somebody's shoulder to see. And the other person's thinking like they're looking for somebody better to talk to, right? That's effectively what it feels like when somebody's looking over your shoulder at like a networking event. So I think that's like bang on. I think the nodding thing is important because it's showing that you're engaged. If you're stoic and standing there with no motion, it's really hard. It's disconcerting, first of all. And it's really hard to read whether that other person is actually following you, right? And seemingly engaged in the conversation that you're having. But I think that I love that your approach of just being aware of our bodies, because they're going to do things, and they can either do things that send the wrong message because we're unconsciously allowing it to occur, or we could consciously allow it to occur, and that might put off a different message. One of my CEO buddies said to me the other day, he's like, I watched your podcast on YouTube. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, I know what you're doing. And I said, wait, what do you mean? He's like, I watched your body language. I turned the volume off and I watched your body language for a good 15 minutes of one of your podcasts. He's like, you're doing all these things. And he named off all of the various things. And he's like, are you doing that on purpose? Or he's like, I think you're doing it on purpose. And I'm like, well, okay. When I learned how to do all those things, it was on purpose, but that's just how I am now.
Right.
Like, I don't have to think about it. Like I am in the place where that's how I listen. And yes, I know that those physical cues to another person are incredibly helpful outside of me being able to parrot back what I thought, actively listen and share what I heard them say. But my engagement in the conversation physically matters a lot. But I said to him, I learned how to do this when I was like between the ages of like 13 and 18. So it's been a minute. I don't think about it anymore. It's just how I show up in the world, but it was taught to me.
Yes. What that signals to me is that you've built up the proficiency. It signals to listeners like this is a skill that you can develop. Some listeners might be wondering, is this just like etiquette or basic manners training?
Right.
And I would say that maybe it's not wrong, but we learn these things and unlearn these things and have to relearn these things throughout our lives, right? And so the pandemic might have hurt our interpersonal skills because we were remote or at home and maybe we forgot how to talk to people. That's okay. Don't beat yourself up. Again, be kind, but let's start building up that proficiency again to make it natural and fluid, and most importantly, feel authentic to you. Because if you feel like it's forced and robotic and you're like trying to do like my formula of engage in eye contact and nod and trade sound, like make it human, make it real. Two other skills I talk about in my book is the skill of mirroring, which is really powerful. I feel like in a virtual setting, specifically, if I'm trying to emulate what you're doing, Mike, or the skill of angling. And just quick story on that, because then we'll pick up the being side. I don't want to neglect that question where we were going. But this morning I was at a coffee meeting, right, Mike? And true story, y'all, like no BS here. The gentleman came in. He was a few minutes later than I was. He came after me, which is funny because sorry, listeners, I have like my fatal character flaw is I'm constantly late, not to calls, but from getting to point A to point B. Like I underestimate how much time it will take. I genuinely do. So I was like super jazzed up. I like emailed him. I was like, hey, what's your order? Like, can I get you something? Just because I was so happy to be early and not just running in there. And needless to say, when he came in like a bull in a china shop. He like was like, hey, Like he kind of like went past me, opened the door, didn't hold the door for me. I'm like, is this guy okay? Like, what's going on? Like, does he have to use the bathroom? But there was kind of some things that I didn't sense connection right off the bat. And that's my top core value. And so whenever we got in there, I quickly realized after a short conversation, he shared with me his alarm didn't go off. He still made it on his Peloton bike, not sponsored, but only did it for 30 minutes, not 45. And I could tell, I knew right away, I was like, homeboy is hungry. Like, he is ravaged. So I asked him, I go, can I get you a sweet treat, man? Like I was kind of eyeing the blueberry muffin. Like, do you want that? And he was like, no, that's very kind of you to get my coffee, but I'll get my food. Like, he genuinely needed food. So he ended up ordering like a power bowl, but it signaled to me, we're all on this planet Earth trying to deal with the experience that we're going through. And initially I perceived it as perhaps a lack of emotional intelligence, or maybe a cold, closed off nature. Like, he did not want to connect. He was doing this more as a chore as opposed to like wanting to genuinely meet me. And that hypothesis was wrong. That was a storytelling narrative that I had to silence and be like, just give him a minute. He's settling into his morning. He needs to eat. And then we had a wonderful conversation that was built on connection. So I say that to listeners just to encourage you. We don't have it always figured out, but we can settle into these moments where we actually build confident and kind dialogue.
I'd love to unpack a few of the things that you just shared, because one of the things that's in the background of that is that you decided to go with positive intent and to extend grace, which we do for ourselves. So if we were running late, our thought process would be, I'm running late, traffic was bad. I wasn't able to, we would extend ourselves grace, right? Like, if we accidentally cut somebody off in traffic, for instance, like, oh, it was an accident. I didn't mean to do that, right? But if somebody else cuts us off, well, no, they're a bad driver and they're inconsiderate. Like, we don't always extend other people grace and kindness. And I love that that's the intent, because it's amazing how much the world shifts when we move to a place of extending grace and kindness to others and imagining the most positive interpretation of the situation, which you did, and then allowed him to come forward and share what was true for him. Now, you could have built up an entirely different story, because, hey, as people, we're making machines, right? Yeah. And with a vacuum of information, we'll just fill it with whatever story we make up. You gave him the space to actually come forward and share what was true for him, which, replaces any other narrative. And you're like, oh yeah, I totally can hear that. He raced off the Peloton, raced over to get here. Traffic was worse than he thought. He's hungry. All of a sudden that kind of drops all of the boundaries and the walls that were in the way of that being a successful start to that meeting.
Precisely. And I forgot the skill therein. I noticed his body language was closed off, and I angled mine more towards him. And only way I was able to get that real story, I think, was because I engaged him and what's going on? Not because it could have come across if I'd said, why were you late? Which he wasn't late. He was like on time or rolling up, or like, what's going on? I'd simply just ask, how's your morning been? Some sort of open-ended question like that. And he was like, well, it's, and that's where he shared, but there was this closed off body posture, but by me angling towards him, it brought him in. And these are little subtle things we can do to create what I call this charismatic connection. So I appreciate the acknowledgement of positive intent. I haven't always been like that in my life, but again, that's a skill too of let's get curious before we get judgmental, which I'm pretty sure I have on my wall.
You do, right behind you right now. For those who are on YouTube watching the podcast, it makes me think of I forget the guy's name, Black Swan. He's the ex FBI hostage negotiation lead for North America. And he his company's called Black Swan. He talks a lot about high stakes negotiation. And one of the tools that he has is in any type of environment where he senses something is off, he'll actually say to the person, bad day. And he's like, it works every time, because if they say, yes, yeah, you know what, this is what's happened to me so far, he can empathize with them. Or they could say, no, actually, no. And then they check themselves. Because they're like, oh, this person thinks I'm having a bad day. Clearly something in my energy is demonstrating that to them. And people will flip instantly into a place of positivity because they weren't able to be self-aware of where they're at, but he only uses it in the negative.
That's fascinating, Mike.
Yeah.
I just had a huge aha breakthrough, because I was thinking how I would respond in that.
Yeah.
And if I did say, no, I'm having a good day. Number one, that's such a defensive posture. Number two, we've been conditioned to say when people ask, how are you? I'm good. And it's like, are you
Yeah.
really good? And so I really love that. Like, and it's all with the tone, the inflection. And that's part of charisma too. Like, bad day, like kind of like probing, kind of like, you okay? You all right? And I think that there's so much beauty in that too, because it allows space or permission for vulnerability and to be like, yeah, actually, as a matter of fact, it is. Like, I was up at 3 a.m., my kid was crying, or blah, 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 blah. And then that's where connection can really be cultivated from, because we're like, oh, I can relate to your humanity.
Right. We're two human beings. Like, we're not human doings.
Yeah.
Right. And we're not the roles that we play in our companies or, all the other roles we have in our lives. We're just two human beings getting an opportunity to connect.
Sure.
So let's talk about warmth. Let's talk about kindness. Let's talk about how we can, one, be aware of our own self so that when we show up in situations, we're able to tap into that place of kindness. Like, how do we get ourselves in that mindset when we're in front of anyone, really?
Yeah. Beautiful question. And what I'm going to respond with is, ask yourself this question: who do I want to be in this situation?
Right.
It's such a powerful self-reflection exercise for leaders, whether you're mentally ping-ponging that question around, whether you're journaling on it, whether you're like writing it down, to putting it on a sticky note to see, ahead of a big call or presentation, you name it. But whenever we do that intention setting, it grounds us. One of my favorite techniques around like the being, I think leaders have the power to positively influence and change team dynamics and org culture. And one of my tools is, in corporate, sometimes it's fun to like spill the tea or like be in on the gossip, the water cooler talk. And the best leaders I work with, they don't spill the tea. They don't engage in that behavior. It's so easy to fall trapped to it. I have many times in my life. I'm like, yo, what's up? Like, I didn't hear that. Like, I want to hear. And then you're like, whoa, check myself, because then you become part of the problem, not the solution. And so what T stands for is, if you're leading a team and a direct report comes to you and they're like, oh, did you hear about so-and-so this weekend, Mike? Here's how you can reframe it through your being. You can say, hey, actually, I'd rather go over your tasks for the week. Tell me your expectations and let's build an aligned action plan together. That simple phrase, T, tell me about your tasks. E, what are your expectations of yourself? I'm empowering you to like rise to the occasion. And then let's build an action plan. I'm on your team. Let's get aligned walking out of here. They don't know that you're subtly shifting the conversation all through your being, of being a champion of, let's focus on the work, not the drama that happens outside it. That's what a charismatic leader does. So it's a really powerful mechanism for a lot of my clients to say, you know what? I've wanted to be liked. This enables me to be respected.
I love that. I forget how young I was when I first heard this phrase, but the phrase is, unsuccessful people talk and gossip and rumor about other people. And successful people talk about what they're up to next, what their goals are, what they're achieving, what they're most proud of. They talk about the roles they play in their life, and they talk about the people that they love. And, I remember being in a conversation with a friend, and I realized, I'm like, oh, this is like a gossipy thing that's going on right now. And one, I don't care. I don't even know who this other person is. And two, I'm not really present with the person who's with me, because we're talking about like a third person who somehow we've now invited to coffee. But I didn't invite them. So I stopped and I said, hey, I totally understand that this thing is going on. That's not really of interest to me. I really am super curious to connect with you and hear how you are and hear what you're up to. And I have a whole bunch of things I wanted to share with you today that I'm up to. Do you mind if we talk about that instead? And the person I was with was like, I had no idea I was just doing that. And I can't believe I just spent 5 minutes telling you that story about somebody. One, it was super gossipy. And two, you don't even know that person. Why would you even care about this? And I'm like, all good. I just would love to spend the time talking about you and talking what's going on for you and talking about the things that are going on for me.
It's a beautiful life lesson too, Mike, because it's like talking about other people's dreams, wants, wishes, goals, aspirations is so much more rewarding than talking about, to your point, people we don't even know. Like, wait, who is that again? How do you know the person? We spend more energy trying to connect the dots than actually champion one another and like really like give people permission to raise their ambition. And I think that charismatic leaders see potential in others before maybe they see it in themselves. So it's easy to default to, oh, let me point the finger of what they're not doing well to make me look good and what I'm doing well. And it's like, no, let's focus on you. And I'm going to pour into you, and I'm going to help you see your success. So thanks for letting me share that. I've actually never shared the T tactic on a podcast before. That's a sneak peek of the book.
I love it. It's great. I also love that you talked about intention, because I think, in our crazy busy worlds, if we roll into meetings without being clear about what our intent is, and we're not checking ourselves going in, then we're bringing whatever energy came with us from the last meeting we were in, good, bad, or ugly. That's just how we're showing up, because most of us, book back to back, or meetings run over. And so it's quite conceivable that you carry the same energy throughout the whole day with a lack of intentionality. And I love the idea of stepping back, and that you brought forward, of stepping back and saying, like, okay, well, how do I want to show up today? Like in this meeting, how I've been doing it for the, last 15 years, I guess I've been doing it this way, is I start the morning with what my intention is for how I want to show up that day. And what I do is I look at my calendar and I'm like, what am I doing today? And who do I need to be today to be successful in the various things I'm doing today? Like today it was be present and be curious. Those are the two things. If I'm present and curious in the 5 meetings that I have today, 2 of which we're recording podcasts, I think that will end up being better. So it can kind of like frame the whole day. I have caught myself going into meetings feeling frustrated, and then recognizing I'm frustrated, about to go in a meeting with people who don't know why I'm frustrated, has nothing to do with this meeting. And that is not the energy that I want in this brainstorming session. Like a frustration energy in a brainstorming session, they just don't mix, right? How do I go from below the line to above the line? And my question was like, who do I want to be in this meeting? What's my intention? Or the other one that I've been taught, which I love, is how do I want the people in the room to remember me when the meeting is over?
That's powerful. And that speaks to charisma. You said this earlier. Charismatic people remember how others made them feel, or people that have been impacted by charismatic individuals who've developed this skill remember how they made them feel. I think the way you phrased it was, and somebody wrote this on my grandfather's obituary, Floyd Miller. He's the first chapter of my book, Mike, it's dedicated to my grandfather, which is really special. He passed away while I was writing the book, and he was a used car salesman. And so there's a lot of preconceived notions about used car salesmen being this or that, sleazy, manipulative, all these things. And the reason he was able to have a career that like sustained him and fed his family was because he actually listened to what his clients, his customers wanted. He wasn't trying to push them this used car. It was, what are your needs so I can match your needs? You tell me you need a simple 2-door car, I'm not going to give you a 4-door Tahoe. Like he actually understood their needs. So I say all of that because I think it's the Maya Angelou quote. We've heard it time and time again, but it's so dang true, is people won't remember necessarily what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And so many people wrote on his obituary that he made me feel like the most important person in the room. That's what you said earlier. That's the power of charisma, especially for leaders. They see the humanity in those they lead or those they serve. And so that's remembered for years, truly. They remember how they made them feel.
Remember the first time I heard the phrase NPC relative to a video game. And I'm like, NPC? And they're like, yeah, like a non-player character. And I'm like, oh, those are like all the computer generated like people in the video game that are just like running around doing their thing. They're like, yeah, you can't control them. They're not players. There's player characters that are non-player characters. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, do you remember the non-player characters? No. And then, but you remember the player characters because you're interacting with them. They're engaging. They're part of the game with you. And the NPCs are just kind of floating around doing their thing. And it kind of stuck with me. I'm like, okay, so like, as I decide how I want to show up in the world, as I enter a room, as I get on stage, as I get into a meeting, like I'm not an NPC, I'm a player character, and I'm going to show up like a player character.
I love that. That's such a powerful visual. I'm not a big gamer. So when you first said NPC, I was like, what does Mike mean?
Yeah.
But you just painted such a powerful picture. I know exactly what you mean now. And to also, I guess, tie it to who do I want to be? A non-player character who's just going through the motions in the world and surviving, so to speak? Or do I want to be a player character who's like giving this my all, choosing my being? We all have agency, right? To make those decisions.
Yeah.
And we have choice. And I want to be a player character. That's cool. That inspires me.
Milam, I really appreciate you making time to be on the podcast today. It's been a blast to have this conversation with you. I'm so excited to read your book when it comes out June 25th, right?
Got
2020,
it. You
2025 coming up, in a little bit. We'll drop all the links to everything we talked about in the show notes. So if you're looking to click on any of these things, you'll see them in the show notes below. But, again, man, thank you. Such a pleasure to be in conversation with you today.
Mike, thanks for having me. It was fun.